What is going on, everybody? And welcome on in to Inside the Browns Beat. It's another beautiful Wednesday, although today it felt like winter again here in Northeast Ohio, but no worries. Tomorrow it's going to feel like spring again, as hopefully you haven't been washed out or swept away or whatever by whatever this weather is we've been having here. But we are glad through all of it that you're joining us here on the OBR streaming network here tonight, as we have got the league meetings to talk about. We got a great special guest that hopefully he can get here to us coming up to talk about it, plus all the latest comings and goings with the Cleveland Browns. And you know it all happens with the OBR. So I'll put the QR code up on the screen. Make sure you get your phone out, scan it, and that'll take you right over to the subscription page for the Orange and Brown Report, the oldest, largest independent Cleveland Browns coverage site in all of Cleveland. All you got to do is scan that QR code. It takes you to the subscription page, and then you can subscribe and be a part of the OBR for all of our streaming, our writing, and just everything else going on over there at theobr.com. We welcome you in tonight. We're glad you're here. Become a part of the show. Your comments already going, but we'll try to save some of your comments and get to that as we're going to flip the format a little bit here, and I think we're going to try to do this moving forward. But I know our special guest is here. We're going to get to him first, and then we'll get to some other topics a little bit later in the show. But with you, as always, I'm your host, Michael Keefe. Joining me, Fred Greetham. Fred, it's April. We made it to April. It's draft month, Fred. We've done it.
April Fool's Day. Hopefully the Browns aren't fooling us. But
how could they at this point?
I see fumble 13, getting bored. I'm getting bored. But with the Browns, there's always something to talk about, So we got a lot to talk about because of the league meetings, and Jimmy Haslam has a tendency to run his mouth a little bit, makes a little bit of headlines, and Andrew Berry moves his lips but doesn't say much. And Todd Monkin is kind of refreshingly, what I heard, pretty much straight to the matter, and kind of cuts through a little bit of it, more so than what we had the last few years. So that's one of the reasons we wanted to have our guest in tonight.
And we're going to get to him. Yeah, we're going to get to him in just a minute, but I think this comment was great from chat_username in the comments. Last time we went to the moon, the Browns were pretty good. Maybe today is a sign of things to come. I don't know if you guys watched like 20 minutes before we went on. The Artemis program launched, and it was awesome. Goosebumps as we're going back to the moon, and that's pretty cool. And hopefully that means good things for the Browns if chat_username here has got it right. Anyways, without any further ado, let's get to our special guest. We've had him on before. He's been on my other show, Garage Beers, which, hey, shameless plug, coming up 9:00 tonight. Grab your beers, hang out with us on Garage Beers. But just an overall good guy and a great guy to talk sports and Cleveland Browns with. We're going to bring him in right now because he was out at the NFL league meetings in Phoenix. He's back in ice cold Northeast Ohio. But we're bringing him in now. Spencer German. Spencer, welcome on back into the Inside the Browns Beat.
Yeah, guys, appreciate the invite as always. I know I owed you one for my miss at the combine, so I'm glad that we can kind of circle back after the annual meetings and make this thing happen.
Okay, wait a minute, because we've got to let the people know you don't owe us anything. You didn't miss anything at the combine. We came to you and we were like, I think I sent you a message that day that was like, hey, you're at the combine. You want to come on with us? And you were like, I'll try, as if you don't have anything else to do. It's not a miss by any stretch.
I just feel bad. I don't like making promises I can't keep. I try to jump on as many of these things as I can, and I know we have. I think Cleveland has a variety of great content, whether it's people who are like legitimately in the building every day, like Fred and I, or whether it's people who sort of do their own thing from home and sort of start from like a grassroots type thing. So anytime I can help out, even any sort of show, I try. And so I like I said, I get it. I don't really owe you, but I felt like I had to make this one happen for sure.
We appreciate it. I wanted to just kind of get, I was hoping to go to the meetings, didn't work out. I didn't go. You were there. So kudos to you being there. Only 5 or 6 of you I could gather there. I think overall, there's always a vibe, a feeling, a sense. Kind of want to get overall, your experience there with interacting with probably the 3 biggest influential people in the Browns organization, what the vibe was coming out of there as just from your perspective.
Yeah, it's a great question, Fred, because, I think especially as the calendar flips to April. Everyone's trying to decipher where is this team, where's their head at with the draft coming. One thing I will say, and Andrew Berry alluded to this, and even Todd Monkin to a degree when he was talking about like Elton Jenkins maybe playing guard, but he didn't really know. If people think the Browns like have all the answers to everything right now, it's just not true. Like they truly don't know. We can do all the mock drafts you want. They don't know who they're taking at 6. They don't know what they're doing with the 6th overall pick yet. And I believe them when they say that. I understand like sometimes trades start at the annual meetings and then it kind of builds from there. But when they say stuff like, we're still figuring out where this guy fits, or we don't know what we're doing with the draft pick yet, I think that's very true. But the sense that I get, Fred, and I think especially from day one with hearing from Andrew Berry, and he mentioned that if they add a quarterback, that it's probably going to skew younger. It'll probably be a younger body that they add to the room. That to me felt like a statement of where this team is kind of at as they continue building the roster, but then also turn towards 2026 and the season ahead. It's not that I want to say they're not going to try to win games, because I first of all, Todd Monkin, first-time head coach, he can't come in here and be purposely losing just to get a quarterback. But I think that the way they've handled the quarterback room, the fact that they've kept things status quo, the fact that Barry made those comments on Sunday about skewing younger potentially if they were to add another one, and then you got 3 guys in the room that are all under 2 years of experience in the NFL, plus Deshaun Watson, it feels like this year for the Browns, more than anything, is going to be about sort of discovery for the quarterback position and figuring out like where they're going from here, whether it's Shedeur hits and they're like, he's our guy, or maybe Dylan hits and he's our guy, or if they draft somebody, he hits and he's their guy, or Deshaun somehow turns back the clock, which I don't necessarily think is going to happen. It feels like they're comfortable with like where they're at the quarterback position right now, in terms of let's just figure out where we're at, and then we can regroup for that specific group in 2027. And again, it's not to say they're not going to try to win, but I think in lieu of winning, that's the number one thing they want to figure out. And I also think that tells me the people who think Todd Monken's just a one-and-done coach, he's not going to be here, that tells me they have a very good sense of like where they are at right now. The Haslams, every time they talk, they start every message with, we understand the fans' frustration. We promise you we're trying to get ourselves out of this. I think getting yourself out of it starts with when you can finally move on from Deshaun Watson, and they know that that's coming next year. So I think they say those things to sort of exude this idea of patience, like give us some patience. We promise you we're trying to do this thing the right way. And I think because of that, they're also going to have patience with Todd Monken and really let him take what I've been calling like a ball of clay of an offense and build it out the way that he sees is best.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about each individual. I was going to start with Barry, but since you brought the Haslams, sometimes Jimmy seems to say too much. A year ago, I think he was right on when he says swing and a miss, everybody knows, and so forth. Did you feel, or was because sometimes hearing just a spot here and there maybe takes it out of context with Watson. Fresh start. He's going to get a legit chance to be the starter. I understand the guys on your team. You're not going to say, oh, he's going to sit in the corner. We're not going to ignore him. But do you have to say that much, about maybe even, it just seemed like Barry first, but then Haslam on the next day kind of brought that door wide open again, like, oh, we thought the door was closed on Deshaun Watson, and all of a sudden they're all talking about him again.
Yeah, I think you're right, Fred. In some ways, I think it's kind of nice sometimes when the Haslams are less, I don't know if it's like, PR prepared, if you will. Like they just kind of shoot from the hip at times like Jimmy does. And I think sometimes that is refreshing, especially for fans who want some like insight into the organization and how they're thinking. I like you said, I thought those comments last year in regards to Deshaun were probably a step in the right direction for sort of healing with the fan base and understanding like, yeah, this didn't work out. At least they realize it. So he did somewhat walk it back this year. But honestly, Fred, like I felt that the comments that Jimmy specifically made about Deshaun were kind of the type of measured answer that he should give at this stage. You're stuck with him on the roster. You got to get through one more year with him at least. I think they understand where he's at, but on top of saying he's got a great chance to compete for the job, and I think some of the stuff that was said kind of got taken out of context to a degree. But he also used the phrase like cautiously optimistic. I think that sums up exactly how everybody should feel about Deshaun Watson at this point. It's like this guy hasn't played good football at a high level since in nearly 6 years. He's coming off of a twice ruptured Achilles, the shoulder surgery, was the suspension back in the day, had the year off that he had. Like, he's so far gone from football at this point. It's like, yeah, maybe that guy can I think the fresh start comment's pretty accurate. Like, he does kind of get a fresh start with Todd Monkin. And if there's a coach that can maybe play to what strengths he has left, it could be Todd Monkin. So I think that's a fair way to look at it, is like, be cautiously optimistic. Again, my stance on it, and I think deep down the Haslams kind of know this. I don't think they really expect Deshaun Watson to give them much. I think they do feel that ship has sailed. I think they're trying to just kind of play nice to get through this next season, because last year, I think, Fred, it was easy to say swing and a miss when you kind of knew he might not even play this year because the Achilles injury. This year, it's like he might actually be out on the field for you at some point, whether he starts off the season or plays later. So I think you got to kind of like be a little bit more measured this time around. But I think the comments from last year still ring sort of true to me, where they know where they're at. They know what they have. They're going to give him a shot because they're stuck with him. But I think they know how this ends, and they're just going to play sort of the cautiously optimistic card and see what he sort of brings to the table before I was even the one who asked about, like, do you envision a world where there's a contract extension conversation with him? And Jimmy shot that down pretty quick. He was like, yeah, it's too premature for that. He said, we got to see how he plays before we even broach that subject. So as much as I know the headline grabbing lines of has a great chance and all these things, were said and people grasped onto those, I think they were a little overblown in terms of like the messaging that they overall gave felt more measured in terms of how they're approaching Deshaun Watson.
Well, while we're talking about the quarterback, guys, I think let's go to a little bit about Todd Monkin, because we heard him talking about it a little bit. And I think he kind of reiterated what he had said previously, which is like his goal is to kind of get to the guy that he thinks is going to be the starter as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
He kind of acknowledged, like, we're not going to have the chance to like really see and evaluate everybody, but we're not going in and just splitting reps in training camp. Like, we're going to give reps to the person we think is going to be the starter. And man, it just feels like every time it talks, it all just points to Shedeur Sanders. For as much as people want to get revved up about Jimmy's comments about Deshaun and another training camp battle at quarterback, I think the couple things, I don't think the Todd Monkin, Shedeur Sanders relationship thing is forced. I think they liked him in Baltimore. I think they were going to take him. That was well documented before the Browns traded in front of him. And so I think he is intrigued by Shedeur. And then I think his comments about, the way things ended last year, we're going to look at that, and we're going to look at where they're at. It just feels like Todd Monkin's fairly excited about working with Shedeur Sanders. And whether you love him or hate him, whether you think he's a franchise quarterback or not, it does all the way back to what you were talking about before, Spencer. It feels like they are discovery mode all the way with Shedeur Sanders. That's what they are trying to figure out.
Yeah, maybe to some extent, Dylan, like, if depending on what happens with him, but I've kind of had the take that it's not like a hot one, because I think everyone's kind of saying this. Like, I think he ends up kind of being the odd man out, because I think they're going to add another quarterback at some point that Todd Monkin gets to select. And we know that Dylan Gabriel was, pretty much a Kevin Stefanski pick all through and through. So we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, it is kind of funny how Jimmy's comments were Jimmy's comments, and it felt like after that day on Monday, oh, it must be Deshaun who's starting. And then on Tuesday, you hear from Todd Monkin, and it felt like, oh, it must be Shedeur who's starting, even though he wouldn't flat out say it yet. So I think in some ways they kind of left us guessing in that regard, because they both kind of said different things. But like I said, the thing that stood out from Monkin's comments most to me was just how different this quarterback competition is going to be from last year, where Kevin tried to kind of make it an even split. And I think the thing that went most awry for Kevin was framing the entire quarterback competition as a 4-way battle. And then we could visibly see that Shedeur Sanders wasn't getting the same opportunities early on. And then guys got hurt. And it felt more like it was a competition between Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco for the starting job and Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel for the primary backup job. And he framed it in a way that didn't seem like that was going to be the case. And so I think that kind of cost him a little bit of good grace with the fan base. And then he tried to sort of make too much happen. He let it prolong into training camp. I think the fact that Todd wants to kind of have a clear answer by training camp is notable, and maybe the most important thing that kind of comes out of this. But when push comes to shove, like, we'll see how it all goes down. I just thought him saying how he sets the depth chart immediately is going to be based off of past performance and end of last year. To me, that screams Shedeur Sanders, because how could you possibly know? Even if you thought like Deshaun looked pretty good at practice, how could we possibly know with like live reps how he's going to look after he ruptured his Achilles twice and hasn't played competitive football in nearly 2 years? And he was talking about watching some of Deshaun's tape, but not all of Deshaun's tape. But he's going back to games from 2023 when he played against the Ravens. And it's like, how could you possibly have any indication of like what he's going to look like as a player at this point versus Shedeur? You saw some progress down the stretch of the season. You saw a strong finish to a degree. I know the Bengals game wasn't great for him, but you saw a stronger finish. To go back to the theme of like the discovery part of this for the quarterback position, it just makes too much sense to find out first what you have in Shedeur Sanders before you go to anything else. Like, at least we have something to learn there. I don't really have anything to learn from Deshaun Watson at this point.
Yeah, I was wondering if it seemed like overarching, the Andrew Berry, the Haslams were very pro talking about Deshaun Watson. And I don't know if it was on purpose that Monkin felt, I need to squash this a little bit, because he said maybe less than 2 sentences about Watson, at least what I heard. And the one was, he's on our roster and he's a part of our roster. And what do you expect me to do but work with people on my roster? I mean, that's not a glowing endorsement. And I was just wondering if he was trying to tone down a little bit of where it was going from the previous 2 days. I was seeing what you and the other people thought when they were there.
I think that's a pretty good observation by you, Fred. And I don't know if that was on purpose, but I didn't write about it. I probably should have, but that quote you read is a good one to sort of speak to the situation, right? It's kind of like they know he's a hired gun and they got to work with him right now because they're paying him. And then once they can kind of move on, they probably will. But to kind of add to what you said, Barry might feel Deshaun can still play and they want to give it a shot, but both Jimmy and Andrew made it clear that Todd Monkin gets to choose who the starting quarterback is. So if his comments speak to him liking Shedeur more, and if he gives in the first crack at it and he looks pretty good out there and they feel confident in it, like, he's going to get to choose who the starter is, and it might end up being Shedeur Sanders just because of that. So I think that is notable, because as much as maybe they have their own opinions on all these guys, it is supposed to be, and I do believe this is one of those like things where I know people question if the Browns are being truthful here, but I do believe that Todd Monkin's going to get the say in that. He's the coach. He gets say in the roster, on the field stuff. Plus, I don't know if you guys saw the comments he made. There was a Giants reporter, I forget who it was off the top of my head, who asked him about like going to Cleveland over New York. And he had a line in there that was kind of like, I made it clear. Like, I thought I was going to be going to New York. I was already watching Jackson Dart tape, and he's told us that before. But he also said in there, I made sure like the parameters were right with the Browns, like that certain things were the way I wanted them to be before I even jumped at that opportunity, knowing it was my first time to be a head coach. So there were certain things that he even wanted in that. And I'm assuming, making sure he's making the final roster decisions when it comes to, what the whole thing looks like, who's starting, who's not, was a big part of that. So I think that's notable as well, Fred.
Well, and I think that, I'm assuming in that, in his talk, he might have been pretty positive about Shedeur, and that meant part of the reason that, besides being an offensive mind, And you don't know, he might have been positive about Deshaun Watson, but some of the takes coming out of those meetings were that Jimmy's trying to recoup his $45 million and save face and all that. I don't look at it that way, because that money's whether he's good or not, it's a win-win. If Shador becomes the franchise quarterback, you got him on a 5th-round draft choice's salary under $1 million for 3 years. If Watson does well, then you at least got something out of it. But so I don't look at it as, in fact, I look at it as more detrimental, is that if Watson plays well and they finish the year, I don't believe he would re-sign here, even though all the stuff that the Browns have went through with him. If he gets an offer, he's gone. And if Sanders didn't get the opportunity, then he's gone. I mean, he's on the team, but you just are telling him you're not able to beat out a washed up guy we're trying to get rid of, so that's also points to Sanders. Browns quarterbacks have went through 3, 4, and 5 the last 3 years. Even if Sanders wins the job, there's a good chance that the next man up is going to be on the field at some point, whether that's Gabriel or Watson or whatever. So I just think that, they're trying to, by not making any moves to date, or we haven't heard, how it works in this. You usually hear reports. They tried to get Malik Willis. You haven't heard any of them. At least I haven't. Yeah. So that tells me the only option left pretty much is the draft. But I cannot see them drafting a quarterback to be the day one starter. They might like Simpson. No. They might like somebody, but they're not coming in to be the starter. So that means one of the three. And likely it's Shador and Deshaun Watson. And I really feel like Shador needs to, if he gets the first crack at it, he needs to take this job and run, because you do not want Monkin in a position saying, Watson really looks better, so we got to go with him.
Yeah.
Because then you're in that situation. You know what I'm saying? If they're close, you can go with Sanders because you got the upside.
Right.
You go the other way, I don't see any positivity out of it.
Yeah. A couple of things to unpack there. First of all, I understand why the Haslams are easy to criticize. And listen, when you make that trade, you got to wear it. Andrew Berry's got to wear it because he's the GM that also initiated it, whatever. So and certainly the Browns have been unable to get out of their way largely during the Haslam's time owning the team, all those things. But I want to be clear here, maybe people can read into the comments so they want to read into the comments if they think it was an endorsement of Deshaun starting. I don't necessarily see that. Again, I think they were pretty level-headed about the whole thing when you read all the quotes. And I know this is a more intimate setting, so it's not all public made available video where you can go back and see it. But I have the transcript and I know what they said. And to me, it still feels like the words from last year are where they're kind of at with it. And they're just kind of taking an optimistic approach to maybe. But I don't think this is the Haslams trying to force the issue because they want to save face on this trade can still work. I really do believe, Fred, that those comments last year with the swing and the miss thing were them sort of accepting it didn't work out. Now we got to find a way to dig ourselves out of this. And that's the direction that they're heading. So I want to be clear on that because I think that that's very true. And I think they recognize that starting Deshaun would isn't going to necessarily sit well with the fan base because of how toxic it can be and the relationship with the fan base because of that. And along those lines, I'll say this too. I also think the Haslams feel that if it's actually better if Shador plays well, because that means they have a guy who's cost controlled for 2 more years beyond this on a rookie contract. That's a 5th round rookie contract. And then they kind of know we have our quarterback of the future. It actually works out better for them if he plays well rather than Deshaun Watson, because at this point, if Deshaun plays well, then they have to go back to the table and decide well, would we want to pay him? Would we want to bring him back? And they know it's a touchy subject. So I think they honestly they're going to let Monkin kind of decide. They're going to let it play out on the field. And I think they realize that it benefits them if Shador actually ends up being the more successful quarterback here in the long run. That's my feeling on it.
Spencer, I think when he made the comments last year, I think that was, in my opinion, that was Jimmy's saving face. That was me looking at Jimmy for the first time in a hot minute, being like, I kind of liked him right there. Okay, because I will say this until I am dead, hopefully a long time from now. I'm never going to fault them for the thought process of getting Deshaun Watson.
Agreed.
I'm never going to fault them for the thought process of saying we've got to do whatever we can do to get our quarterback, and we're going to lay it all on the line to do it. And it could not have been a more epic flop. But I don't disagree with the thought process of maybe not Deshaun Watson and the situation he was in and all that. I'm not trying to say that, but just getting the quarterback. So I do think it's safe. I'm not mad at them for making that move, even though it flopped. I thought it was saving face, like, okay, hey, it didn't work. We're going to get out of it. We're going to make our next move to try to get our quarterback. Guys, real quick, on the outside of the quarterback talk, Spencer, while we've got you just a couple more minutes here, just really more important issues. Where was Todd Monkin when they were taking pictures out there?
Apparently he was getting his hair cut for the picture. It's funny. I was like sitting in the lobby working on some stuff of the resort, and they took the picture like right out front of the resort, like on this like grass space that they have up front. And so I'm like sitting there and I see like, oh, there's Liam Cohen, there's the Harbaughs, and like all these coaches start walking by. I'm like, where are they going? And then I turn around, look out the window, and I see like, oh, they got the photog out there. I'm like, oh, they're doing the coaches picture. So I naturally I walked out to like see, and as they're like all getting set up, I'm like squinting because I'm not like out on the grass. I'm kind of off to the side. And so I'm kind of like squinting. And first thing I did was I counted all the coaches, and I counted 30. And I was like, all right, so there's definitely 2 coaches missing. And I'm like, and I definitely don't see Todd Monkin out there. I was like, so where is he? And I had people mad at me on Twitter because I tweeted it out. I was like, no Todd Monkin for the coaches picture. Wonder where he is. And like people thought I was like trying to start something. They were like, why even put this out there? Sean McVay was missing too. I was like, dude, it was literally just me stating a fact. He just wasn't there. I wasn't trying to say he was doing something nefarious. I wasn't trying to say anything. And as it turned out, he was doing nothing nefarious. He was just getting a haircut for the picture. I think maybe like they set an initial time and then they changed the time. And so that's maybe why he didn't get the message, I guess. I think that's possibly what happened. But yeah, that was kind of funny that his first coach's picture and he wasn't there.
Got to get the hair looking right for a picture you're not going to be in. Spencer, before we let you out here, we spent so much time talking quarterbacks, but any other interesting tidbits that you take away from the meetings? Obviously specific Browns related things that you take away, but anything else you took away from the meetings that you were like, maybe this isn't specifically Browns related, but this is real interesting?
Yeah, I think some of the big things on the Browns front did come from Monkin on Tuesday. The fact that he mentioned Elton Jenkins, the quote he had was, "I would love for him to play guard," and we know he's a Pro Bowler 2 times for being a guard. And I've kind of talked about that a little bit on my show, the Locked On Browns podcast, because I kind of feel like, yeah, if you can get him to play where he's been a Pro Bowler, I think he was an okay center, but I think he's a really good guard, and so I think that makes some sense, but you wonder where Joel Bitonio comes into that. Like if he actually does come back at this point, which I have my doubts, then maybe they would make him play center. But if he doesn't come back, then maybe that's your left guard. So they have some flexibility with those guys. And Monken did say it's still to be determined. But the fact that he made it known, like, I'd prefer he's a guard, I think is notable. I also thought it was interesting that Monken mentioned he wants to get he wants to add a fullback to the roster. A couple of different things. I think that speaks to what he wants this identity on offense to be. And it's a good place to start, too, because you already have Quinshon Judkins. That's like a big box check while you're still looking for wide receivers and things. So it's about getting that offensive line right so he can, yes, he led the league in yards after contact last year, but he was getting contacted so early at the line of scrimmage that's like, hey, it'd be nice if those holes were a little bit bigger. So they got to get that offensive line right. But having a fullback that can sort of lead the way for him, I think, as well, is kind of a big deal. So I think that's notable. I would assume they're going to look for somebody in the draft because I don't really think the fullback free agent market is all that vast at this point, obviously. But yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting as well. Yeah, and just, I always try with Barry because, Barry really doesn't give you much when it comes to trying to like get details on guys that are interested in whatever. But I always try to ask questions that maybe give us better perspective on like philosophically how they're thinking and how they go about like evaluating guys, because I think that's more useful this time of year than just being like, hey, so what do you think about Ty Simpson? Like, he's not going to give you anything on that.
Right.
And it does feel like, and this is the thing people forget when they're out there like mocking, hey, Carnell Tate's going at 6. That should be the pick. He's my favorite player. Or, oh, it's going to be Monroe Freeling, which I love Monroe Freeling, and I'd love if they took him wherever. But I also think like Barry's for the people that think you can't trade back because it's like a loser mentality or whatever, guys, like Barry's message is always the same when it comes to draft picks. He always says he wants to maximize the value of the pick. And so if maximizing the value of the pick is trading back, getting a first next year or second next year or whatever you would get, and then 5, 3, 4, 5 picks later, getting an offensive lineman that they really like, they might view that as maximizing the value of the pick. He did the exact same thing last year with Hunter and deciding not to take him so he could take Mason Graham and move him back a few spots and getting an extra first for this year. So as much as people think like, oh, there's a need that has to be filled, let's just take the common denominator guy that's going to be there, that's at the top of the board at that need. I don't think that's the way Andrew Berry thinks. And I think people just need to kind of keep that in mind here as we get closer and closer to the draft.
I wanted to just ask,
Sure.
if you had another second about
I'm
Andrew
good.
Berry. We didn't really talk about that. I mean, I've been around, you've been around him. Monkin was refreshing because he pretty much is straight, kind of giving you what he thinks. Berry is like Kevin Stefanski in the way he says a lot, but doesn't say a lot. And, the biggest takeaway I had, was the talk. It was a lot of talk about Myles Garrett. We on this show last week, it happened right when we were on, and Jack Duffin, our salary guy, came on, got up from London and interrupted.
It took us this long to get to Myles. It's funny.
Well. And I was just, did the group, I know how it works with all the guys, everybody talks. What did you guys come out of there feeling? Did you buy what he said? Do you feel like this is just out of the blue? We just decided to do this the day before the bonus was due. I mean, how did you read that?
It's a really good question because there's so many different interpretations of what he said, right? And I ran into this. I did an episode shortly after he talked of Locked On Browns, and I was talking about this exact thing. I led the show with, what did Andrew Berry say? What did it actually mean? And people were getting mad at me because they're like, dude, he said as much as he could that he said he's a career Brown, so clearly he's not. And I want to be clear, like, Andrew is very good about navigating those types of questions, choosing his words wisely. And as a GM, first of all, I don't blame him. The question that was asked directly to him when he kind of gave a very like dodge answer was, can you unequivocally say that you're not trading Myles Garrett? And as soon as he started the question with, here's what I can say. As soon as he said that, I was like, he's leaving the door open. And everybody else can say they heard something different. Because he kind of went into this whole tangent about like, he's a career Brown. We see him that way. And, I don't want to waste any more breath on it because we talked about it so much last year and this year. Fine. I get it. And on some level, I get why he's probably a little bit annoyed because he did have to talk about it a ton last year. But as soon as he started that question, can you unequivocally say you're not trading Myles Garrett with, here's what I can say, the light bulb went off for me and I was like, he didn't say no. He didn't say no, we are not unequivocally, or yes, I guess the answer would be yes. He didn't say yes, we're not trading Myles Garrett. Like, that was not the answer. And so unless he says that, I interpreted it as the door's still open. And him saying he's a career Brown, like, anybody can be a career Brown while they're on the team. Like Shedeur Sanders, you could say, hey, we see him as a career Brown because we think he's going to be our franchise quarterback. Great. But if he doesn't play well, he's not going to be a career Brown. Like, they're going to find a different quarterback. You can say that about anybody. They thought Nick Chubb was going to be a career Brown, I'm sure. And then how did that work out? He ended up not being here last year. Like, you can say anybody's a career Brown until they're not. The timing of this, and he also had the comment about, like, we didn't have to do this to trade him. Yes, but at the same time, if you can save money by doing this to then trade him, you're going to do it. That's what good GMs do. Like, they take the path that's going to cost less dead money. So I understand and I can appreciate the fact that he probably is exhausted by the Myles Garrett topic. I get it. But
Spencer, I'm so sorry to cut you off, but
no, you're good.
He makes my blood boil with this. And I'm an Andrew Berry guy. I believe in the way he does things, and I think the reason they haven't been good is overly simplistic, but it's because of Deshaun Watson in that situation. And that's why they haven't been good, because he's been able to build a pretty good roster at places. And yeah, maybe he got stuck in a situation where they had the oldest offensive line that got hurt all the time, and it was really expensive, and they have to move on from all of them. But not even to get into that. This is something I try to teach my children. Your actions have consequences. You don't get to be upset and frustrated and mad at reporters and people asking you questions about a situation that you created. You did it, Andrew. You did it. And to in my opinion, I think what they did makes a ton of sense. And I don't think it means they are going to be actively shopping Myles Garrett. I think it opens the door in case a guy who's already asked for a trade out of Cleveland decides to do it again, maybe next year, but this time be serious about it. But if you're going to do something and then you're going to get asked about it, give some level of a satisfactory answer.
Yeah,
don't get mad about being asked about it.
That is, and we did talk about this while we were out there. Like, if it's something he really wants to put to bed and he doesn't want to waste any more breath on, frustrated as he clearly is about it, give us an actual reason why you did it then. Like, why did you move this money if you didn't have to do it to trade him and it didn't really matter? What was the point of it? Was it like, and I understand he always gives the answer of like, we don't talk about players' contracts. Yeah, but you can say philosophically, we just like having the players' bonuses sometimes kick in right before the season starts. That's just talking very broadly about everybody's contracts, because I think there's other guys in the team that have a similar stipulation in their contracts. So you could just say that we like that. Okay, cool. We like the flexibility. Cool. At least we have an answer. But when you're asked point blank period, like, can you unequivocally say this? And your answer isn't yes, I can unequivocally say it. Yes, to me, the door's left open. And by the way, to your point, Mike, I don't blame him as a GM. Like, you don't ever want to box yourself in, because if you say we're not going to trade him and then a year from now you're trading him, everyone's like, well, you're a liar. But we also have to remember, this is also the GM who sat up there with Kevin Stefanski in 2022 and was asked, do you guys still believe in Baker Mayfield? And they said, yeah, we believe in Baker Mayfield. And then 2 months later, they were shopping for Deshaun Watson, and they obviously moved on from Baker Mayfield. So it's that fine line of like, sometimes it's less about what they actually say and more about what they didn't say, and understanding that press conferences, I think I got to give Darryl Ryder at 92.3 the credit for this quote, but he always says press conferences are not sworn testimony. So they can lie and say what they want and manipulate words and make it sound a certain way. Saying that he's a career Brown, yeah, I get it. I get why people would take that and run with it and say, he's telling you right there he's not trading him. But if you can't answer a point-blank question of like, are you going to do this, with no, we're not going to do it, then I think that sort of speaks for itself. But that's my feeling on it.
And you're inviting the questions that are getting you so
you're inviting more, 100%. 100%.
And I don't know if I wrote this the other day. I don't have anything to go on, but just surmising, Myles Garrett this time last year won it out. No question. He's embarrassing the organization. He gets paid. Gets the biggest contract for a non-quarterback. Okay, he checks a big box. But that doesn't take away, I still believe he wants to win a Super Bowl. I still believe he has those feelings. And he might have said to the Browns, or he might have said to his agent, could you see, I know they can't trade me. Is there any way we can get it so maybe they could? And I don't know if Andrew Berry could say, well, that was one of the things they wanted to, if that makes it worse. But it just seems like this non-answer when we all know there was no reason to do this other than to create flexibility. And maybe they will after this year, saying, wow, we went 2-15 again. We have a chance to get the number one quarterback, but we got to do whatever. If Myles would be the answer to get us over the top, let's do it. So that's just what enters into it. But it's like last year, you were at the pre-draft. He went on about Ohtani. He's a unicorn. He's the best player in Major League Baseball. And we were talking about Travis Hunter sitting with the number 2 pick.
Yeah.
Cam Ward's going with 1. There's really nobody to worry about. You got the best player, the next show, Ohtani, for football. Let us all that road, and then makes the trade. Yeah. Well, they had that trade worked out 2 weeks in advance if the Titans took Cam Ward. So Andrew likes to be cute and kind of, I feel like he tries to fool us all the time, and that's okay, but it's like,
why
couldn't you just?
Yeah, Fred, he clearly didn't want to put his name on a quote of just, we will not trade Myles Garrett, because he knows if that ever happens, then he looks like the fool, because then it's like, well, then everyone's criticizing him because they're like, you said you weren't trading him. Why would you trade him? You promised us this and then you lied, and then he looks like a liar. So he didn't want to look like a liar. I understand a GM operating from that standpoint, but yeah, it's all very curious. I think what I would say is, like, leaving the owners' meetings, I kind of felt like, okay, we can put this to bed for now. But once June 1st, actually, even before that, because let's face it, all the discussions about who the Browns are going to take at 6, right?
Right.
What if the best player available is Reuben Bain? What if the best player available is, I don't think he's going to slip, but like Arvell Reese slips, or David Bailey's there.
Mm-hmm.
And the Browns are like, well, hey, best player available, we're going to take him. This is going to come right back up again, because everyone's going to be like, oh, they took a pass rusher and they still have Myles Garrett, who they say they're apparently maybe not trading because he's a career Brown. Everyone's going to think like, oh, they just drafted the replacement to Myles Garrett. That's going to be what it is. And by the way, I think Myles, in the ilk of LeBron, because he's friends with LeBron and they talk and all that, I think LeBron obviously left, tarnished his relationship with Cleveland for a while. Maybe some people still haven't really forgiven him for leaving again. But, he comes back and wins a championship and it's all good. But I think Myles, similarly, like I agree with you, Fred. I think he still wants out to win a Super Bowl at some point. Like, if he can't do it here in Cleveland, and obviously Cleveland's timeline isn't really lining up with his. And so I think he doesn't want to do it the LeBron way, where he looks like the villain when he leaves. And he'd like to sort of go out with a smoother, if he were to leave, he wanted to be a little bit smoother, where the fan base still likes him. And what better way to sort of have that be your ending in Cleveland after you came out and put together the greatest season a pass rusher's ever put together in terms of sacks, right? Like, you set the single season sack record. If that was his swan song, well, hey, Browns fans can't really be mad at him, because it's like the team didn't give you a good offense to support how great you were, and you gave us this incredible, unforgettable season on the way out. Like, who's going to be mad about that, really, when push comes to shove? So I don't know. The timing of it's all interesting. Barry's comments on it are very interesting. Like I said, for now, it's something I'm kind of putting on the back burner. But the second we get to the draft and we see what they do, I'm sure this is going to pop back up again, and people are going to be talking about it.
Yeah. Spencer, man, this has been great. It's been great catching up with you. We appreciate you bringing us some insight from your time out there at the owners' meetings, at the NFL league meetings, especially behind the scenes on Todd Monkin's haircut. That's big stuff right there. But Spencer, it's always good catching up with you, and you can catch Spencer doing this on the Lockdown Browns podcast, where he gives you all kinds of good stuff like this all the time. So make sure you're following that. Spencer, we appreciate you coming on Inside the Browns Beat here, and we'll catch up with you again down the line.
No doubt, guys. Anytime, I'm always happy to jump on with you. I appreciate the invite as always, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks,
see you soon,
Spencer.
Fred. Yep. See you guys.
Yeah.
Big shout out to Spencer German, Lockdown Browns podcast. Man, he got me fired up there for a minute. But like, Fred, just to put a bow on this conversation, a couple of things he brought up that I want to hear your takes on, and you guys get in the comments. This kind of leads to one of them. Chris Zitzman on Facebook says, if somebody's going to give up the farm for Myles, they're in contention. And that's why AB keeps bringing up 4 to 7 years down the road, all that kind of stuff for the first rounders. Yes, Chris, like, I think that's a solid point there. And again, my issue isn't with what they have done with Myles' contract. And frankly, my issue isn't with the fact that they might trade Myles Garrett at some point. I don't really want them to do that this year. I would like to see Myles at least have another year here in Cleveland to see if they can maybe get something going the right direction with a new coach and all that. However, next year, 2 years from now, if some team comes to you and says, we're going to give up more than anybody's ever given up for an edge rusher for Myles Garrett, and the Browns are just still kind of floating out here trying to figure life out, yes, okay. And so I don't mind the Browns giving themselves flexibility to trade anybody, but just don't be coy and nonsensical with your answers. Just say, hey, we are a team that values flexibility. We value knowing that at some point down the line, if we do need to make decisions that are going to be hard decisions, but ones that we think are going to be right for the organization, we want to set ourselves up to do that. What is hard about saying that? Like, why is that so difficult? Why is that so hard?
Yeah, I agree with that. And as I wrote the other day, not everybody read it at the OBR, but it makes no sense to me to trade, well, especially when with the June 1st, no matter what Barry said, we can trade him anytime. Well, there are, why would you make a trade and have a 40-some million dead cap or this or that? So you got to wait till after June 1st, as I understand it, to trade him even. So you're not going to get anything out of it for the 2026 season unless you get a player, a starting player to replace him. It's usually draft picks. So you're sitting here with the draft in 3 weeks.
Right.
It would make the most sense to me if you were going to trade him now and get the 12th pick of the draft or whatever it is, or as high as you could get with a team, and then you add to the number 6 and you can really, address some of your offensive needs. I detailed it in that story. I went back where Garrett he has a no trade. He would only approve a trade to a perceived Super Bowl champion. So even if you took the AFC championship, NFC, that's the top 4 teams roughly. So they're drafting 29 to 32. Let's say they gave you 3 first rounds. Let's say before they shot down the 5, I went back the last 3 years, the players drafted on the top teams or in all teams, 29 to 32. You wouldn't trade. If you picked out the 3 best, you wouldn't trade Myles Garrett head up for and say, wow, we got a great deal.
Right.
And that's where you're going to be drafting. I think fans get enamored with first round draft picks. I went back 10 years from 29 to 32. Yeah, TJ Watt was the 30th pick in the 2017. But can you trade Myles Garrett right now and say next year with the 30th pick, they're going to get the next TJ Watt? No, you know that. It's a lottery ticket. So that's my problem. How does that help the Browns be better? And I also listed in that article, I ranked just my top 32 quarterbacks who projected to start this year. And if you said, we'll trade you Myles Garrett for this guy, I went into the 20s before I came up with a team that would say, yeah, they might do that. And they were all Cam Ward, Malik Willis, Jackson Dart, guys that might be good, but aren't established already. Or else they're the Geno Smiths or the guys that are on their last leg. So my point is, if you're going to trade Garrett, you better solve the quarterback issue, or it really doesn't do you a lot of good, because you just don't replace a guy like Myles Garrett, who Todd Monkin said they spent 2-3 guys who's going to block him because how much of a game wrecker he is. That's a big reason the Browns have one of the best defense in the NFL. You take him out, okay, yeah, go draft a defensive end. You hope he might be a Pro Bowler, but then he's going to be Myles Garrett.
I think the other interesting thing that Spencer brought up, and I think this is a fascinating thing. It's actually kind of goes in with my topic for our show that we do this side up, where I do Mike's draft pours. But Spencer talked a bit about the draft, and in talking about this Myles Garrett situation, he brought up, the way Andrew will not answer questions about this means that if they are going to go best player available in the draft, and me personally, I still want to see that top end wide receiver come off the board to the Browns, because they just have never done it. And they've put good work in on the offensive line this offseason, and I want a real weapon at wide receiver. But am I convinced they're going to do that? No. Am I convinced they're going to take an offensive lineman? No. Am I convinced they're going to trade back? No. I think everything is in play for the Cleveland Browns at number 6. I think everything is in play for them at 6, which means, to his point, let's say that David Bailey, who I think is the best pass rusher in this class, falls to 6, and the Browns take him. I wish Andrew would be a little more. I understand. I agree with what he said. He gave credit to Daryl Ryder about, you're not under oath in these press conferences. I know you're not going to say everything about everything, but if you would just be a little bit more clear about why he's doing things, it would make other things go away. It would make him have to answer these questions less. Because to be honest with you, I just watched the Seattle Seahawks win a Super Bowl because other teams could not stop them from getting to the quarterback. And just defensively, they were smothering teams. And then offensively, they were scoring enough points to win. You want to put David Bailey across from, like, if they make that pick, I don't think it's the replacement of Myles Garrett. I think you are just putting together two of the most fantastic pass rushers you could possibly put on a team together and letting them get after the quarterback. Again, it just stems to Andrew and not just kind of opening up about the question and saying, hey, this isn't all about trading Myles Garrett. It's giving us flexibility. So if we draft David Bailey at 6 because we think he is far and away the best player on our board, we're doing it because we want him with Myles Garrett, not because we're trading him.
Yeah, you kind of create more obstacles for you. And I agree with that. You know, it goes back to our Caleb Downs thing. If you are convinced one of those guys that might be there is the next Hall of Famer, why not make your team, your defense so much better? It always comes back with Myles Garrett or whoever. How does that make my team better? If you guarantee, okay, you're getting Patrick Mahomes in the deal for Myles Garrett, okay, I can be sold that deal. Yeah. But teams aren't parting with a quarterback. That's why the Browns are in this situation. And as much as it's been so unpleasant with Deshaun Watson, I don't fault them. I was for them turning over every rock the year they acquired Watson. I didn't know he had as much off-field baggage as came out, but that is why they were so desperate to make that move. Andrew Berry said after the trade, we expect him to be here for the next 10 years to solve that problem. And that's what happens when you get the franchise quarterback. Obviously that didn't happen, but that's until they get that solved. And that's why I say your best chip, if you're going to make a move with Garrett, is make sure that it involves getting a franchise quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Fred. So again, we heard from Spencer. We heard from the league meetings. So now here we are. We're in the stretch run when it comes to the NFL draft. We're just a few weeks, as you said, a few short weeks away. NFL draft coming up towards the end of the month here in Pittsburgh. And so what kind of things now that the league meetings are done, the Browns withdrew their we should be able to trade draft picks from forever from now. They withdrew that at the league meetings. But what's kind of the final stuff we're keeping an eye on here for you, Fred? What's the stuff that you're really intrigued with as far as where the Browns are at right now, leading up to the draft, and you know, anything that might happen between now and then?
Well, the one thing is next Tuesday, April 7th, the Browns will start their offseason program. Because Todd Monkin's a first-year coach, the Browns get, I think it's a week, maybe 2 weeks earlier than the rest of the experienced coaches. And they also get an extra mini camp, 3-day mini camp, and it's going to be the week of the draft. So you're going to get to see, he said 45 to 50 players he expects in for that. That might be the first time we see him on the field because they have a couple weeks where it's classroom stuff. So I don't know when exactly we're going to be able to see him on the field. And that's what we've all been waiting for, to see, okay, who's going to get the first reps with the starter thing, even though it's voluntary. So that's what I'm looking for is next week, they are going to be back in the building, their first meeting, the 7th. We don't know yet, or I haven't been told yet. They haven't announced if there's going to be media availability. So if it is next Tuesday or even Wednesday, we'll at least have talked to maybe some of the players and the coach, before we get on the show next Wednesday night. But that's what's going to be happening here because it's a new coach. You're going to have more availability and practices than we had in the last 5-6 years because of the new coach. They get it's not great for me. It's less off season, but we get to go out there usually 1 day a week, I think is what's available. And so I don't know yet if that starts next week or not, but I think that we'll get some pieces, the puzzle. I don't expect a lot of moves. I didn't look at the date. Last year when they signed Joe Flacco, it was before the draft, but it was late. I mean, we thought it was going to be Kenny Pickett and then the draft. And then they added Flacco, and everybody's scratching their head why they did that before the draft. Then they draft 2 quarterbacks. So I don't expect much happening in personnel, but if we can get out and see them on the field here in the next couple of weeks before the draft, we might at least get some more feel on what they're intending. But yeah, it's kind of that slow time, but it'll happen in a fast minute here. 23rd NFL draft, and we're going to have a little bit to talk about, like I said, with the OTAs and all that. There was some nuggets, that Spencer brought up. The one thing I heard, I think it was Barry, talk about Martin Emerson. A little disappointing to hear that, made it sound like, we're not really going to even try to bring him back because he probably doesn't want to come back here anyway because he probably wants to go somewhere and be a starter. What he was basically saying is we got Tyson Campbell and he's an outside with Denzel Ward, and we don't have a slot guy and we don't look at you as a slot guy. So we'll see.
Fred, one last bit of news that did happen just recently with the Browns, but we talked about it last week, and then it's just a really interesting bit, and I want to know if you have any deeper insight on it. But the Browns made the move to sign A.J. Epinesa from the Bills, the pass rusher, and I was fairly excited about it. This is a guy that has had very limited snaps with the Bills, but his snaps have been productive the whole way through. And the Browns back out of that signing. And so Epinesa is back on the free agent market. And the Browns do not have that player, as a depth piece on the defensive line. And the Browns cited health reasons. They were not comfortable with the physical. They were not comfortable with some health reasons for a guy that has never missed more than 3 games in a season. The guy that consistently plays 14 games a year minimum. In Epinesa, and I think it's interesting. Have you heard anything a little more in depth on it as to why they would pull out of that deal?
No, it was kind of I was wondering why they hadn't announced the signing because they hadn't officially,
Right.
And now we know it wasn't obviously a Max Crosby, but I actually thought, yeah, it looked pretty good. He had 3 years of like 6 or more sacks, and that's another indication, in the draft they could, because they lost Cameron Thomas and he was their 3rd or 4th defensive end, expected Epinesa to be the 3rd or 4th. So they have a need there. And, I don't know if that, obviously if they drafted an edge rusher, in the 1st round, that would solve that issue. But I don't know how high they would go to get one, or if I haven't re-looked at the defensive end free agent list. I saw Joe Tryon Oshinka, who they had last year, signed immediately with somebody. I think it was the Commanders or something. It was like, because I thought, well, they might go get him again. And it's like that whoever said, we better scoop him up. So, yeah, he was kind of insignificant. So, yeah, it was. I thought that was going to add depth for sure. But I don't know what's available. I guess I'd have to look back down on that list. It's going to be, there's always a short list of those 30-something free agents that It wasn't like it was a big contract with Epinesa. It's like a 1-year prove-it deal. So it had to been legitimately they didn't feel good about him even playing. I know his production was down last year. I think he only had 2 sacks after having 6 or better the previous years, but it was a little curious. And those are little nuggets that kind of throw away. Oh, by the way, he's not going to come here. And oh, by the way, Emerson. And oh, so yeah, I do think they will add there, whether it's a draft or what. We'll see what happens here.
Well, like I said, we are just a few short weeks away. We're officially in April here, which means we are in draft month. And I do want to remind everybody that's watching, we're going to have the OBR Draft Cave going throughout the entire draft. That weekend, we'll be here wall-to-wall coverage, breaking down what we see in the draft, what the Browns are doing, and how the draft board falls to give you the best analysis we can give you. So make sure you are locked in here on the OBR streaming network for our NFL Draft Cave that we will be doing again. Also, just plugs to the rest of the shows again, whether it's the Gang of Three or whether it's Pete and Joe, whether it's This Side Up on Thursdays or it's us on Wednesday nights. Just a lot of content coming at you on the OBR streaming network. Tonight, Wednesday nights belong to Inside the Browns Beat and then Garage Beers, which we will be up. It's 8:00 right now. So in 1 hour, you got a chance to go use the bathroom, grab a snack, get your beers, come hang out with us. We're going to talk about the Guardians. We're going to talk about the Blue Jackets, the Cavs. We'll probably maybe get to the Browns a little bit. We might not even get to the Browns a little bit, but we're going to talk about all of our other favorite teams tonight. So make sure you're over there for episode 308 of Garage Beers at 9:00 here on the OBR streaming network. And speaking of the OBR, make sure you get over to the OBR.com and you hit subscribe to be a part of Cleveland's oldest, largest independent Browns coverage site, going strong since 1999. So make sure you are tuned in to the OBR.com. Fred, it's been a blast. Big shout out to our special guest, Spencer German, for coming on from Locked On Browns. Go ahead, Fred.
I was just going to say, this is our 31st episode already. Time flies. But episode 32 is going to be a focus completely on the draft. We have our lads, top scout, Dave Syverson's going to join us next week, probably for the entire hour, just talking Browns and what he sees and what he hears. In fact, the next 2 weeks, we have a draft specialist. So set your timer to join us as well next week and get everybody else and have your questions for Dave. And it's going to be a blast because I kind of pay attention when it gets close, but this guy's doing this 12 months a year, and he could tell us, what's the best angle for the Browns to approach this and a lot of things. So plan next week for a big time with our lads, one of the oldest, most respected draft services. As long as I've been in the NFL, they've been one of the go-to places. So as far as that, should be a blast next week.
Yeah, it's going to be a great time. Thanks for bringing that up, Fred. That's going to do it for us for this, our 31st episode, though. So, again, get over to the OBR.com, hit subscribe. Big thank you to Spencer German for coming on, and a huge thank you to all of you that were in the comments, bringing up a lot of good stuff here tonight. We appreciate you for joining us, as always. Again, that'll do it for us here. He is Fred Greetham. Go follow him at Fred Greetham9 on X. I am Michael Key. Follow me at Garage Beers Mike on X, and I will see you guys at 9:00 for Garage Beers episode 308, and then we'll see you back this time next week for Inside the Browns Beat. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you then. As always, go Browns.